Okay, so we'll start now with Tanan Hoso. We learned in a Mishnah. So the Gemara is going to actually ask about the from our Mishnah. The Gemara is going to ask a question which is going to be challenging what we learned in our Mishnah. Okay, so let's see. Tanan Hoso. So we learned over there's a Mishnah in Makos on Daf Chov Gimel Amud Aleph. We learned in a Mishnah, Kol Chayovei Krisus Shaloku. All those that are liable for Krisus, and they've received Malchus. Now, many times in the Torah gives a penalty. The Torah doesn't give a penalty at all. The Torah just says, don't do this, don't do that. There's a lav, there's a prohibition, but there is no specific punishment. We know whenever there is a lav, it has to meet some other criteria, but the punishment is malchus. So we're saying sometimes the Torah says that don't do something, and the punishment becomes krisus. So now the assumption in this Mishnah, we'll discuss this in a minute. So it's a lav, and it has malchus, but the Torah also says that there's a penalty of krisus. There's a penalty getting cut off, which means 50 years old, 60 years old, whatever, there is a penalty min hashamayim, which they cut you off physically, spiritually, in a spiritual way, whatever the interpretation is, but that means koris. So the assumption right now is, since it is also a lav, it also has koris. It's like a regular prohibition, but there's also a penalty of koris. So what happens if the person received malchus? So then he says that they are exempt, they're no longer liable for koris. Kol chayove krisus. Shaloku, all those that are liable for the penalty of krisus, but they had already received malchus, shaloku, they got malchus because it is a lav. So they got malchus. The koris is in addition to the lav. The lav gets them malchus. If for whatever reason they don't get malchus because there's no witnesses there, in order to get malchus, you need to have the witnesses there. They need to see them. That's how you're going to get malchus. If there's no witnesses there, you don't. Then there's no malchus. So then they would still get krisus because krisus still remains. But if they did get malchus, again, this is the case. Kol chayove krisus. All those that were liable for krisus, shaloku, that they got the malchus, nifteru midei krisosom. That exempts them so that they're no longer liable for krisus. The fact that they got the malchus, so Hashem doesn't, that's the punishment. So why do they need krisus? If they didn't get malchus, say that Beis Din couldn't do it, there was no witnesses there, what other case was. But if they got malchus, there's no more koris. Nifter midei krisos. Rashi, kol chayove krisus shaloku. How did they get malchus? Shehisru bahen edim. They were warned by witnesses. Alav she'ime koris. There was a prohibition, which also has koris with it. Beloku beBeis Din, and they got malchus in Beis Din. So once that happened, nifteru midei krisos. So they have become exempt from their krisus, which means nifteru midei krisos. Shuv ein Beis Din shomayla nifroim. That the Beis Din above will not anymore collect from them. They are, from now, they're exempt. Okay? What happens if it's a lav that doesn't have chorus? So there's nothing to be exempt. It doesn't have chorus. We're talking about a lav that has chorus. If they got the malchus for the lav, so there's no more chorus over there. But if there was no warning there, so you can't do the malchus, so then if it's a lav that has chorus, they'll get the chorus. Where do we know this from? It's a shenemar, because the pasuk says in Dvarim, Perik Chav Hei pasuk Gimel, V'nikla achicha le'inecha. The Torah talks about there after the person gets the malchus. So the verse says, "V'nikla achicha le'inecha," that your brother will be degraded before your eyes. Notice the word here is achicha. After he got the lashes, after he got the malchus, so your brother will be degraded before your eyes. The Torah calls him here your brother. Before them is the Torah refers to him as the guilty one, as evil. That means if the Rasha is someone who gets lashes, so we call him a Rasha over there. But over here, the Torah calls him Achicha, your brother. So we learn from this that Kivon Shalaka, that once he got the lashes, Harehuka Achicha, then he's like your brother. So if he gets the lashes, then he's considered your brother. Okay, so that means that he doesn't get any more chorus. Divrei Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. These are the words of Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. Okay. Omar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan on this Mishnah that this is only his opinion. This is Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel's opinion. He says, Rabbi Yochanan says no. Chalukin olav chaverov al Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. That his friends, meaning the plural, friends of Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, disagree with Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, which means they hold that even after you get malchus, even after you got the lashes, you'd still get chorus. Why do you think Rabbi Yochanan is telling us that statement? He's trying to tell us the halacha is not like Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel. He's saying that even after you get malchus, you're still liable for chorus. Rabbi Yochanan tells us that the friends of Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel, the Chachamim, disagree with him. All right. It seems like this was a chiddush. This was something that Rabbi Yochanan told us here. So Omar Rove, says Rove, Amri Beirav, they said in the Beis Medrash, Beirav means in the study hall, they said, Tanina, we learned this. In other words, there's a Braisa, there's actually a Mishnah. Our Mishnah clearly states, that's why it's brought down here, because from our Mishnah, we can see clearly, he says, that even though you got malchus, you're still going to get chorus. He says, we can prove this. Why? So in other words, the question what he's asking is, why is Rabbi Yochanan coming to give us this novel idea that halacha is not Rabbi Chananya ben Gamliel? Rava says, they said in Yeshiva Tinina, we already learned this in our Mishnah. What did we learn? The Chalukim, that they disagree. So our Mishnah would be a point of disagreement. How do you see from our Mishnah that even if you got malchus, you still get chorus? So he says like this. Our Mishnah states like this. This is the Mishnah that we just learned. It says that Ein bein Yom HaKippurim l'Shabbos. It says there is really no difference between Yom Kippur and Shabbos. And as we learned before, Rashi explained that what it meant to say is that there is no, whatever is not allowed on Shabbos, you're not allowed on Yom Kippur either. The difference is, on Shabbos, on Shabbos, if you do a sin b'mezid, you get punished by man, which is bisas bezdin. Shabbos, there's skila for violating being Chal Shabbos. And if you violate intentionally Yom Kippur, then you would get koros. So, Isa, if it is true, like Rabbi Chaim Wolosow, that you get, once you get Malchus, there's no koros. So he says, then this is not the koros. They're both by man, because also Yom Kippur, you're going to get Malchus. And once you get Malchus, there's no koros. So he said, if it's true that they have been exempt, so this and this, Shabbos and Yom Kippur, are all punished by man. There is a Malchus there. And the Bezdin will exempt him from Koros. So you don't really get Koros on Yom Kippur, but you get B'dei Adam, you get Malchus, and then you're exempt from Koros. So it must mean that they hold that even though you got Malchus, you're still going to get Koros. And that's why the Mishnah says, there's going to be Adam, there's going to be Koros. Yeah, you get Malchus also, but on the top of the Malchus, you get also Koros. But if when you get Malchus, you don't get Koros, so they're both B'dei Adam. There is no Koros over there, because once you got Malchus, there's no more Koros. Omer Rav Nachman. You follow the question? The question is, since the Mishnah said that on Yom Kippur you get Koros, if you do it b'mezid, you get Koros, it must mean that Malchus doesn't exempt, which means that these Mishnah disagrees on Rabbi Chaim Wolosow. So why did Rabbi Yochanan have to tell us that Chalukah of Chaverei? It says in our Mishnah, because otherwise the Mishnah would not have said, the Gemara is saying, the Mishnah wouldn't have said that you get Zezdoina be Koros, that Yom Kippur is Koros. No, Yom Kippur is also the other, because you get Malchus, and once you get Malchus, you don't get Koros. Since the Mishnah says you do get Koros, it means that even after you got the Malchus, you still get the Koros. So that means that we disagree. We don't need Rabbi Yochanan to tell us that. Omer Rav Nachman. So what did Rav Nachman answer? Rav Nachman comes up with an answer over here. And he says like this. The Oilam, do the Rashi. Rav Nachman says, before the assumption was that if there's a lav by krisus, he would get Malchus. The Gemara brings down the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak holds that whenever the Torah has a prohibition, a lav, and the penalty is koros, that changes the penalty. It means that there is no Malchus, there's only koros. It's not like there's koros or Malchus. or in addition to Malchus. But he says it substitutes. When the Torah gave you the punishment, that's Rabbi Yitzchak's opinion. When the Torah gave you another punishment by specifying Kodesh, that means there's no Malchus over there. So, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak, our Mishnah, so it's not a question. You're not going to there's no such a thing as Malchus by a sin which the Torah writes that you get Kodesh there. There's no such a thing, according to Rabbi Yitzchak. So when our Mishnah says, it's not, we don't know that there's a disagreement. Maybe everybody holds that after you got Malchus, you would not get Kodesh. There's no disagreement on that. That's if we hold that you get Malchus when there's a prohibition of Kodesh over there. But since Rabbi Yitzchak holds there's no Kodesh when there's a prohibition that involves, there's no Malchus when there's a prohibition that involves Kodesh. So therefore, the Mishnah says, our Mishnah says that you're going to get Kodesh. This is going to be Kodesh. Because there is no Malchus. Omer Rav Nachman. Let's look inside. It says Rav Nachman. Really, the Rabbanon, the Chaverim of Rabbi Chaim and Gamliel don't disagree. Everybody holds that if you got Malchus, you won't get Kodesh. Why does the Mishnah say you get Kodesh? This that we says that there is no Mezid is not punishable by man. This follows Rabbi Yitzchak. Omar. He says Malchus bechayev krisis leka. He holds there's no Malchus when the Torah says you're chayev krisis, there's no Malchus. Of course, Rabbi Chaim ben Gamliel holds that there is Malchus by chayev krisis. And he says that if you got Malchus, you're exempt from Kodesh. But this other rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak, holds there is no such a thing as Malchus by chayev krisis. Man Rabbi Yitzchak, the Omar ben Masechta Makis. He says in Masechta Makis, the Ein Malkin Belav Anitin Lazhoras Kodesh, that you're not going to get Malchus. You're not going to get lashes if it's a prohibition that has been given to warning of Kodesh, and you might get Kodesh for it. Afilu Yisru B'Le Malchus, even if they warned him for Malchus. So there's no such a thing. There's no Malchus by a prohibition of Kodesh. If the Torah warns you for Kodesh, there's no Malchus. It doesn't matter. If they come and say, don't do this, because you're going to get Malchus, it's not going to help you, because there's no such a thing. Yoliv Taima. Mahikro. The pasuk is going to learn in a minute. Tanya, so it quotes now that statement of Rabbi Yitzchak. So do you understand how that we brought in Rabbi Yitzchak, how we answered the question that Rava asked for Meirab? How did we answer the question by introducing Rabbi Yitzchak? The challenge was because the Mishnah says that by Yom Kippur you get Kodesh. And the challenge was, if it goes like Rabbi Chaim ben Gamliel, you don't get Kodesh. Because you already got Malchus, because you didn't make it. So there's no Kodesh. How does it say there's Kodesh? Must mean that some people hold that even if you get Malchus, you don't get Kodesh. The Gemara said, no. It's because the Mishnah holds that there's no such a thing as Malchus when it comes by Kodesh. So he's not exempt from, he gets Kodesh, not because Malchus doesn't exempt him, just because there is no such thing as Malchus by Kodesh, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. And that's what the Mishnah goes by. But if there is Kodesh, if there is Malchus there, then the Malchus would exempt him. The Tanya. This is the source. Rabbi Yitzchak says, Chayve krisis bechlal holu. That all those that are liable for Koris, they were included in the previous parsha. So there is, the pasuk says, in the portion of Kedoshim, the Torah says if one marries his sister, will get Koris. Why did the Torah have to specify that if you are intimate with your sister, that you would get Koris, when it is part of all prohibited arayis, which the Torah counts? Why did the Torah specify? Let's look inside. Rabbi Yitzchak says, "Chayove krisus b'chlal hoyu." Those that are guilty of Koris were included together with all the other arayis. Look, Rashi. Kol chayove krisus shel arayis. They were included in the general of all those who are chayiv krisus of arayis. Shel arayis hoyu b'chlal. They were included when the pasuk says, anybody who does any of these sin, the pasuk says, "V'nichresu hanafashis ha'isos," those souls that do this will be cut off. This is written kosu b'parshas Arayos in the parshas of Achri Mois. Over there, the pasuk states that in Vayikra Yudches, the Torah states that they will get a chorus. So how come there's a special pasuk for chorus by one sister? There's another pasuk when a person has a relationship with their sister. The Torah says that Lama, why did the Torah have to write again chorus by his sister? This is in the next parsha in Kedoshim. Lama yotzus chorus b'chaysek. Diksiv b'Kedoshim tishu tiyu v'ishki chasachaysek v'goymer. We'll get chorus over there. Why did the Torah have to say it again? See, in the pasuk over here, all right, I thought I could find the parsha easier. Okay, but the pasuk says that. So, therefore, the Gemara says the reason why the Torah wrote it again to emphasize laduna bekores v'loy b'malchus. The Torah says it again. It says you get kores, you don't get malchus. Laduna bekores v'loy b'malchus. Im hisru bahem. If you warn them, so you don't get. So the Torah therefore writes again to emphasize that they get just chorus and not malchus. And basically from this we learn out, just like by his sister, we learn out that you don't get malchus at all, but all of the chorus don't get malchus. And Rashi answers also another question, that the truth of the matter is, it's not just achoisei. The Torah also repeats there and says by Anida that there too there would be chorus. Rashi says, so why did the Torah, if you're asking me a question, why did the Torah have to repeat by his sister? Why did the Torah have to repeat that by Anida there is chorus? So the rest is the Dovash is Chadish Bon Nishnas. That was repeated also for some new halacha. It was repeated over there, and it says laharoa, that even haroa, which is not a full intimacy, still that is still prohibited by a nida. So therefore, there's a reason for that. Okay. So again, I just want to make sure that we're clear on what the Gemara, on the flow of the Gemara. Who were we challenging over here?
Rabbi Gamliel or
We're challenging Rabbi Yochanan.
Rabbi Yochanan. Okay.
Rabbi Yochanan came and told us that the Rabbi Hananya ben Gamliel's opinion is just that, his opinion. But the halacha is not like him, because Rabbi Yochanan said his friends disagree upon him. That's what Rabbi Yochanan came and told us. And Rava came and said, well, I don't know why Rabbi Yochanan in the yeshiva, they said Rabbi Yochanan didn't have to say that, because it's very clear that the Chachamim disagree. Where is it very clear? From our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says that you get Kodesh. Why would you get Kodesh? If you got Malchus, like Reb Chaim Wolosow, then there's no Kodesh there.
Can you just say you get?
So Rahman says,
Kodesh,
no. The Mishnah doesn't disagree with Reb Hananya ben Gamliel, but the Mishnah goes like Rabbi Yitzchok, who holds there's no Malchus in the first place when there's a sin of Kodesh. Okay? The Gemara quotes where he knows it. Rabashi gives another answer. The Gemara's answer now is like really a very obvious, simple answer, and it's a very logical answer. The fact that the Mishnah says that he would get Kodesh doesn't necessitate that after Malchus he gets Kodesh. All what it means is if there was no Malchus, he would get the Kodesh. The Mishnah says that by Yom Kippur it's mainly Kodesh. However, if you warn him that he's going to get Malchus, okay, you'll get Malchus, there won't be Kodesh. Just because I'm saying that the Mezid is Kodesh, that means if he was warned for Kodesh, which is the main, then he would get Kodesh. If he happened to be that they warned him for Malchus, okay, then he would be exempt from Kodesh. Says Rabashi Omar, Rabashi says, Afilu Tema Rabbanon. Even if you say it goes like the Rabbanon. Ze Iker Zdoine B'dei Odom. By Shabbos, the main punishment for Mezid is by man, is by Bezdin. V'zeh, but Yom Kippur, Iker Zdoine B'ikoris. The main is Kodesh. If he's warned for Kodesh, not for Malchus, then he'd get Kodesh. Rashi, Afilu Teva Rabbanon. Damri, Malchus Eitzel Kodesh. Even it goes like Rabbanon, not like Rabbi Yitzchok, but like the Rabbanon. They say there is Malchus by Kodesh, even a proven Kodesh. Still, from our Mishnah, we can't learn out that they're disagreeing with Rabbi Hananya. We needed Rabbi Yochanan to tell us that, because the Mishnah doesn't mean it. Because this is what the Mishnah is saying. Mishnah is not saying that he's going to get Kodesh even if there was Malchus there. What our Mishnah is saying is that Shabbos Iker Chomer is doing with the Adam. The main seriousness of the Mezid, the main seriousness is that Beis Din will take. That's the main thing. But not V'zeh Iker Chomer is doing. The main seriousness of the Mezid is the Kodesh. Doesn't mean, in other words, Kodesh is a more stringent, is a more chomor. Doesn't mean that it goes against Rabbi Hananya ben Gamliel. That's why Rabbi has to say. That's why Rabbi Yochanan has to say Chaluk al Chaveirov. Because from the Mishnah we don't have any evidence. Because in the Mishnah is only saying that this is punished by Kodesh. It's not saying that if he got Malchus, he won't get Kodesh. Follow? Okay, we're going to go to the next Mishnah. Sounds a little bit complicated, but let's go back to it. Mishnah. This is all going, like I said, Ein Bain, everything is Ein Bain, because we started talking about no difference between Oder Rish and Oder Sheni. It brings down, it's the nature of the Mishnah to go from one topic to the next one. Says the next Mishnah, a person has a right to say, I'm not going to benefit from you. Well, you can say it in one or two ways. You can either say it, I'm just a blanket statement. I'm not going to benefit from you at all. Or I can say, I'm not going to benefit, I'm not going to eat of yours. I'm not going to benefit to eat of yours. If a person says, I'm not going to benefit food, eventually everything leads to food. In other words, if it's money, with money you can buy food. So the Mishnah says, whether you said to your friend, you don't have to say it to him, you can say it to witnesses, you can say, I will not, or even to yourself, whatever the definitions over there, I will not benefit from my friend. That means a blanket. Or you say, I will not benefit food from my friend. In both cases, you can't benefit at all. The only thing that you can do is you can come into the person's house. Because that doesn't involve money, that just, if you said, I'm not going to benefit from you at all, then you're not allowed to even walk into his house. But if you said, I'm not going to benefit food, then you can walk into his house. Says the Mishnah, Ein bein hamoider hanoah mechaverer. There is no difference. If you said, I am vowing not to benefit, hanoah means benefit, from his friend, there's no difference. Or he said, that I'm not going to eat your food. And Rashi says, Ein bein hamoider hanoah. Moider hanoah chomur mi moider meichel. If you vowed that you're not going to benefit, that's more serious than vowing that you're not going to just eat from his. Because the difference is elodrisa saregel, stepping of your foot. In other words, entering the other one's property. Drisa saregel is Rashi. Shahamoider hanoah. If you made a vow that you're not going to benefit, then you're not allowed to enter his house. But mutter. But one who vows that he's not going to eat, then it's permissible. That's one thing. And yet there's another thing. The kelim she'ein oisim bahem oichel nefesh. If you vowed, I'm not going to eat from you, if you want to borrow his lawnmower, say, you're allowed to. Why? Because it doesn't bring to food. Borrowing, you're not getting it. Let's read Rashi. You are allowed to borrow such vessels, such tools that you don't do with them oichel nefesh. If you do with them oichel nefesh, that's considered oichel. But if you're only mother Michael, then you can only you can use those, you can borrow, loan those that you don't do oichel nefesh. And if you said not hanoah at all, you can't do that either. Let's do the Rashi. Mutter lahashil lemuder meichel. That you're allowed to loan to one who vowed that he's not going to eat from you. The dafke, Rashi says, the dafke, Rashi gives a stipulation that even if you said, even if it's just Muder Michael, that he vowed not to eat, also, not always can you borrow it. Because if people normally rent out, it's a place, let's say it's a lawnmower, and let's say you have to, if you, the guy didn't loan it to you, you would have to go rent it. So it turns out that the loan saves you money, the rental money. So then you're benefiting the food, because eventually the money can be put to food, like I said before. So Rashi says, this is bad. This is only that you're allowed to use it if it's a place that people don't rent out similar to that. So you're not benefiting any monetary gain. But if it's a place that they do, Tanam behedya the osur. Learn beferish in the Mishnah that it's prohibited. The chol hanor. The reason is, this is a rule, because any time there's a benefit, and she'im loy ha'hanoi, had the person not benefited you, that person wouldn't benefit you. Then he would take away a pruta, a minimal amount, a penny, which you can benefit food. So because it turns out, by giving you the lawnmower, you don't have to spend the money, so you have an extra money to buy food. Because that pruta is fit to buy food. So therefore, only when are you allowed to borrow the vessels that you don't do oichel nefesh? Only if it's a situation that you don't rent similar, and then you can do that. Okay, so that's with the Mishnah. Now we'll do the Gemara. Holy Indian kelim shoysim oichel nefesh. But what happens with those vessels, cooking utensils? So there is zev shavim. So then in both cases, you're not allowed to, because that's a food item. You're cooking it. So that's considered oichel. And Rashi says, zev shavim. They're both equal. Holy Yekelim shoysim oichel nefesh. But as far as vessel that you do use them for oichel nefesh, asur ab b'muder meichel. That's prohibited even if you just vowed they're going to be meichel. Even though you don't rent it, so you're not gaining, but you're directly benefiting from a keli that you're cooking in it. So you're not allowed to borrow it, even if it's muder meichel. Okay. The Gemara says, the Mishnah said, another difference is, there is a regel that if you said, I'm not going to benefit, you're not allowed to even come into my house. Why is that called a hanoah? The Gemara wants to know. How am I benefiting coming in your house? People don't care about it. But the Gemara, there is a regel, people don't care. So if they don't care, why do we consider that, oh, I'm benefiting from you? If people care, and then they let you in, that's called you're having benefit because they're letting you in. But if people don't care, why is this prohibited if you said I'm not going to benefit? Why are you not allowed to come into my house? Zog the Gemara, Amar Rava, says Rava, Amani Rabbi Lezer, the Omar. This goes like Rabbi Lezer, who says, Vitur Osur b'muder hanon. He says that if you don't care, you give up, it's still Osur b'muder hanon. Vitur ektrash dover she'muter b'chol odom ve'ine makbid alov. Things that show mevater b'chol odom ve'ine makbid alov is still prohibited. It's still prohibited. Doesn't matter. It's not something, if I don't care about it, and therefore, okay, come into my house. Doesn't matter. Even if I'm a vater, that's the opinion of Rabbi Lezer. He holds that it's also a vater. Okay, we'll leave it over here. Just give you a short word on the parsha. So, of course, we started now. We started now the portion of Dvorim, the new book of Dvorim. And the new book of Dvorim is a little different than the other four books of Bereshis, Shmois, Vayikra, Bamidbar. Rebbe brings out from the Gemara. The Gemara says that the first four books, Moshe said it from the name of Hashem. And the fifth book, the Dvorim, he said it on his own. So Rashi, Tosfos, everybody explains, doesn't mean Chaz v'Sholom. Everything was done with Ruach HaKodesh for sure. But there's a difference between the first four books and the books of Dvorim. How so? Rebbe explains that the Torah is the Torah's Hashem. It's on a very high level. The high Torah, Hashem's wisdom and Hashem's will, the mitzvahs, came down all the ways to the human beings, to us in this world. It's a big jump. Who was the intermediary who can bring the Torah from Shamayim into the earth? It was Moshe Rabbeinu. An intermediary needs to have a little bit of the upper and a little bit of the lower. And because he has them both, he can sort of serve as an intermediary, as a vehicle to bring the higher and the lower together. Moshe Rabbeinu is considered to be physical on a very complete. He was tall, he was beautiful, he was strong. He had the wholesomeness in the physical world. But Moshe Rabbeinu was also wholesome in the spiritual because he was totally self-negated to Hashem, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, he was the proper conduit through which Hashem gave us the Torah. So Moshe Rabbeinu could take the Torah that was high up and bring it down. He's called the Memutza. He's the intermediary to bring the Torah from Hashem to the Jewish people. When we talk about an intermediary, there's two possibilities. Sometimes an intermediary serves just as someone that you pass through there. Say, for example, you have an elevator going from the 100th floor to the floor 1. So the elevator just doesn't stop at every floor. It just goes from 100 to the bottom. So it goes through, but the floors didn't do anything to what's coming down. It went through them. Can't get from the 100th floor to the first floor. You got to go through all the other floors. So Moshe Rabbeinu, in one capacity, in the first four books, it was Hashem's words, just came through Moshe Rabbeinu. It came to the Yidden. But Moshe Rabbeinu didn't do anything. Then you have the elevator stopping at every floor. Every floor, it gets a little bit of descent, it gets a little bit of changes, and then it comes down to the bottom. That's the second level. That's the way Mishnah Torah, Devarim. Over there, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to actually absorb it, became part of it, and brought it down later on to the people. And Moshe Rabbeinu needed, Hashem gave us, Hashem didn't want to give us a Torah which would be totally aloof. He wanted the Torah, that's why we have the Mishnah Torah. Through the Mishnah Torah, same is true with the rest. The Eibishter wants us to internalize the Torah. The Torah should become part. Moshe Rabbeinu took and brought it down to us at our level so that we should be able to really appreciate the Torah, come down to our level. Which is also the other idea of the Rebbe says that, sometimes you can give someone, just give them a gift and they don't really work for it. But sometimes you give somebody the tools, you make them work hard for it, so then they get an appreciation for what it's either you give just like that. Some parents spoil their children, they give them whatever they want, whatever they ask for, they give to them. So the kids don't work for it. So it becomes like the Zohar calls it shameful bread. It's not something that they worked at. It's just you got a gift. But sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu wanted us to work for the Torah to give it down to us. That we have to work for it. So we're not just going to get it. We're going to work hard, and that way we're going to internalize. The Torah is going to become ours. Through Mishnah Torah, actually also the rest of the Torah comes down. So we hope that we are actually going to receive the Torah, especially now we're doing the 9 days of mourning for the Beis Hamikdash. We study about the Beis Hamikdash, we study about, we strengthen our Emunah and our trust in Hashem, that Hashem will give us back the Beis Hamikdash, bring us Mashiach Tzidkeinu, take us out of Golus, and lead us to the Geula Amitis V'Ashlema. Okay, so that's it for today. And Mitzvah Hashem, see everybody again next week. I hope that you feel better, Roy.
Thank you.
And your brother-in-law, the doctor, will take care of his sisters and everybody. Hashem will take care. And he will be the good shliach. Hope to hear good news from everybody. And we'll catch up with you next week, Mitzvah Hashem.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good night. Before Shlema. Before
Thank
Shlema.
you. Thank you.